afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Today, I want to share with you some of conclusions of my doctoral research project. Specifically, I will share 4 reasons why surrogacy is never ethical, whether in altruistic or commercial modalities. Before we begin, it's important to recall that according to international figures, 98% of surrogacy cases are commercial and only 2% are altruistic. Therefore, it's a fact that it is a technique that is primarily commercial. Why is surrogacy not ethical? An ethical act refers to an action that is considered right or good in terms of what is just, honest, and beneficial to others. Therefore, there are 3 fundamental principles to protect individuals in biomedical process, which are respect, justice, and beneficence. I will develop 4 reasons why surrogacy cannot be considered ethical. The first, because it instrumentalizes the gestational woman. Second, because it turns children into objects of transaction. Third, because there is no right to justify it. And fourth, because it is unfair business. First, surrogacy instrumentalizes the gestational woman. The discussion about the position of surrogate women in surrogacy is perhaps one of the central issues in the global debate surrounding this topic. It is true that a woman has agency over herself and the capacity to decide freely whether to participate in this type of practice or not. From a liberal expression of feminism, it is understood that pregnancy substitution is one of the reproductive options available to women as an expression of their freedom and autonomy. However, it is a fact that the consent given by a woman to engage in surrogacy is not a decision made in full freedom due to the asymmetric position she holds in relation to the commissioning parents and intermediary agencies. This is evident in the difference in socioeconomic conditions, technical and legal language, language barriers, and generally in the negotiation and control capacity during the practice. On the other hand, the bioethical principle of autonomy indicates that for it to be morally acceptable, a full exercise of autonomy is required, which is only possible under conditions of justice and equality. In the case of surrogacy, the gestational woman limits her own autonomy throughout the concept by which she agrees to be part of the technique. Therefore, we face a paradox, as a supposed free consent through a contract nullifies the woman's autonomy itself. Immediately after giving her consent, her autonomy is suspended and she loses the capacity to retract and to decide on the process of gestation, childbirth, and delivery of the child. This fact is evidently contradictory to the bioethical principle of respecting autonomy, which explains why surrogacy is based on an anomalous approach of it. Another central question regarding the morality of the act itself is whether it is ethical to ask a woman to become a means to achieve reproductive ends. In other words, whether it is ethically permissible for a woman's body to be subject of a contract. In sense, whether the instrumentalization of her body is acceptable. Surrogacy is structured around the liberal concept of the contract, understood as an agreement between consenting parties In this case, the object of the contract is the woman's uterus, her gestational capacity, and the child resulting from the pregnancy. Thus, the instrumentalization of the gestational woman is a certain fact. The woman who lends her body to gestate a child for others consents to being reduced to a mere instrument by a third party, which directly undermines her dignity as a woman and turns her body into a commodity. It is important to remember that the market has limits and therefore not everything can be bought and sold. The market in general must have moral limits, and if we do not impose them on the surrogacy market, it will erode the desirable, inalienable character of humanity, which we call human dignity. Even from the controversial terminological question, there has been a despersonalization of the woman serving as a gestational woman, being referred to in regulatory proposal as a gestator. For example, in the latest legislative initiative in Colombia, the word woman disappears and is replaced by gestating person. Furthermore, it must be considered that the meaning or value of reproductive labor is immensely superior to the value of money, so its exchange corrupts and degrades the value of reproductive labor. Regarding this, the questions arise as whether a woman's reproductive capacity can be separated from what a woman is in herself. Understanding that the human person is a substantial unity of body and soul, the answer is that the body and its functions or capacities are part of what the person is in themselves. Thus, the introduction of money into surrogacy services, or simply the possibility of trading on a woman's body and reproductive capacity, leads to the loss of something valuable and the devaluation of motherhood. Therefore, the question of whether a woman's reproductive capacity has an intrinsic moral value and whether its transaction implies instrumentalization, the answer is yes. And for this reason, surrogacy is never ethical because always it involves instrumentalization, appropriation, and exploitation of the woman. Second, surrogacy turns children into commodities. When considering the role of children in surrogacy, the facts demonstrate how they are treated as commodities, serving as the subject of transaction through which contractual obligations are fulfilled upon their delivery. For that reason, surrogacy entails the commodification of human life, as the newborn is regarded as property that can be transferred for free or bought and sold at a price. When children are commodified and become part of the market logic, their rights as legal subjects are affected, as the desires of adults often take precedence over the rights of the children. For example, the human right to family identity, the right to filiation, dignity, among others, are affected or in some case nullified. Likewise, children involved in this practice suffer unfavorable consequences for three reasons. The first, because of the risk of being abandoned when the commissioning parents change their minds or are dissatisfied with the child they receive. Second, because of the emotional harm caused by learning that their gestational mother transferred them to others in exchange for money. And third, because the existing children of the gestational woman may feel aggrieved and experience relational identity conflicts upon witnessing their mother being pregnant and then seeing her hand over the baby to another couple or individual. In this regard, it is evident that children born through surrogacy receive treatment as commodities, as control objects, and not as legal subjects, as the natural person they are. Therefore, surrogacy generates market dynamics that lead to the commodification of children as they are either transferred for free or sold for a price. It also implies an infringement of the rights of children, as their rights are subordinated to the desires of adults. Consequently, it is a practice that violates the bioethical principle of respecting the human dignity of children and the principle of non maleficence towards them. Third, surrogacy lacks legal justification. An important argument that seeks to justify surrogacy is the right to motherhood or fatherhood. However, upon reviewing the different constitutions in different countries, it is evident that there is not fundamental right to be a parent. Rather, there is the right to family, under which individuals can decide the number of children, and that is something different. One thing is being able to decide the number of children one wants to have within the framework of family reproduction, and quite another is the supposed right to transfer or sell a child to obtain one. There are no right of one person over another. Parents and child are subjects of rights in themselves and ends in themselves, so it is never justified for children to exist to satisfy the desires of adults. Conceiving a child in a woman body who will not be its mother to satisfy the maternal or paternal desire of other people is treating human life as a commodity. Surrogacy is a practice that does not respond to the guarantee of a right because being a parent is not a right. It is a desire that, moreover, can only be satisfied by individuals belonging to socioeconomical classes with high economic capacity, and therefore, rights that only exist with a price tag are privileges. 4. Surrogacy is an unjust business. Gestating a child of others has become a transnational industry that generates significant economic incomes and in which there is a significant power asymmetric between the intended parents and gestational women. It is a system of baby reproduction on demand that generates expanding gestational markets within the context of a global economy. It can be described as a reproductive neocolonialism and even as a trafficking of women for reproductive exploitation. This practice is a business supported by a commercial contract, a source of significant economic benefits in which the gestational woman not only usually receives the most insignificant part of the profits, but also bears the greatest burden. She is one who truly faces greater physical, emotional, and moral risk in the short, medium, and long term. In the short term, it is known that medical exams often require surrogate gestational women to undergo invasive and painful procedures such as hysterectomy without any compensation or guarantee of selection. Furthermore, they undergo psychological evaluations that are overly invasive, intimidating, and discriminatory. Additionally, it is common for the health of the couple, if they have one, and even their children to be evaluated. In the medium term, there is a risk of multiple pregnancies as a consequence of transferring several embryos derived from in vitro fertilization and significant hormone doses hyperstimulation to ensure the implantation process and pregnancy. In the long term, after childbirth, there may be sequelae such as infertility resulting from cesarean sections, problematic scars, postpartum depression, or emotional problems resulting from the separation from the child or rejection by the family and social environment. All, all of the above negatively affects the physical, moral, and social integrity of the gestational woman and should be considered as an obvious harm for which agencies that hire them do not always take responsibility. Commercial surrogacy practices are morally objectionable because the way they function disproportionately and unfairly benefits intended parents and surrogacy agencies at the expense of the interests of gestational women. Therefore, another unethical aspect of surrogacy is that intended parents and an agency take unfair advantage of the economic need of gestational women to impose terms, conditions, and burdens that they would not otherwise accept. In conclusion, after the bioethical assessment of the case based on the bioethical principles of respect, justice, and beneficence, it concluded that surrogacy is an ethically objectionable practice. Those who promote surrogacy emphasize the benefit of a diversity of reproductive options for those who naturally cannot conceive a child. However, although that may be a genuine consideration, it is a dehumanizing practice and cannot be placed above the need to prevent the exploitation of, of some of the world's most vulnerable women and children as subjects of special protection. Finally, children's rights must prevail over adults' desires, and the maternal bond shall not be subject to commercial transaction. Surrogacy cannot be considered ethical as long as it continues to violate these fundamental principles of bioethics. Thank you.